guys, I'm Hellhound, and welcome back to my Midnight Spook Show. Um, if you saw my last video where I reviewed one of my favorite albums by the band Anthrax, you'll see that I went to an awesome concert last night with Slayer, Anthrax, Testament, Behemoth, and Lamb of God, and I had a very good time, and it really got me in the mood to talk about metal. So I figured let's take a look at some books. I'm going to count down my top five favorite heavy metal autobiographies. So these can't just be any heavy metal books. They have to actually be written by a member of a heavy metal band, an actual musician. So that's the only criteria we're going to look at today. There's 5 books. I realize there's a lot more that I haven't read yet or I don't own. I'll talk a little about those afterwards. But anyway, let's go ahead and begin. All right, number 5. My fifth favorite heavy metal biography. This just came out recently. Is the one by Bruce Dickinson, entitled "What Does This Button Do?" All about Bruce Dickinson, the singer of Iron Maiden. He wrote this book. There he is, and I gotta tell you guys, this is a very well written book. He did a good job, and I'm pretty sure he didn't have any help. He didn't have a co-author. He wrote this book completely himself, which is very impressive. And I gotta say, this is probably the most well written of the bunch too. Yeah, there he is in Maiden. But guys, I gotta be honest, I was a little let down by this one. It was a great book. Again, it was a good read. I'm glad I read it, but I was a little disappointed only because, well, first off, Bruce Dickinson isn't just the vocalist of Iron Maiden. He's also an accomplished an airline pilot. He's a fencer, a beer brewer, an author, which again, he wrote that book by himself, which is very impressive and very admirable. He's all these amazing things. I'm glad he included all those things in this book. However, I bought this book as a Maiden fan. I bought this book as a fan of Iron Maiden, and I suspect a lot of other people did too. And, you know, I'm glad he included all those other things, of course. That makes him more interesting, for sure. But I gotta say, a lot of the Iron Maiden parts were glossed over. His relationship with his bandmates, I didn't really get much of that. A lot of the information I already knew. Yeah, why did Adrian Smith leave? Why did Clive Burr leave? I didn't really get that. He didn't really talk much about Paul Di'Anno, the previous Iron Maiden singer that he replaced. You know, he didn't really talk much about how he left Samson to join Iron Maiden. A lot of the music stuff seemed to be like glossed over in favor of. There's entire chapters in this book about how playing works, how to brew beer, fencing. I scanned over most of them. I just could not get into that stuff. And again, I'm glad he included it in there. It makes it more interesting, but I feel like he went into way more detail about the other stuff than he did about like heavy metal and about being an Iron Maiden. He also left out a lot of personal relationships. Like, did he ever talk to his parents again? Like, after, you know, he became an adult? They didn't mention it. He didn't mention any of his marriages or relationships, which I kind of admire because, you know, I think too much time was spent on those things and some of the other books. I kind of wanted to read more about the music stuff. Again, I'm glad he left that stuff in, but I kind of wish that he spent more detailed stuff on Iron Maiden, his relationship with his band members, the writing process, how the albums came to be, you know, how he wrote the songs. I mean, there's a lot in there. I'm still glad I read this book. It's still pretty informative and insightful. But again, he didn't go into very much personal detail, and I feel like I didn't get to know Bruce Dickinson as much as I did with the other authors in the other books I'm about to talk about. I feel like I really got to know them, really got to feel their story. I feel like I still have a lot of questions that weren't answered in this book. You know, I already know most of the history of most bands. I love reading about how bands form. That's kind of another thing missing from this book. All the other books I have in this top 5 list were written by a founding member of the band, so I got to see the history of the band, how the band was first formed, how they came to be, how they came up with the name. Bruce Dickinson joined the band, 3 albums in. He first appeared in the 3rd album, Number of the Beast, so you know, obviously he's not going to talk about the history of the band because he wasn't there. So, I mean, you know, it's understandable. I'm not blaming him for that. But I'm just saying, it just felt like something was missing. And when he first joined Iron Maiden, I feel like it all happened too fast. There wasn't much detail. But again, I'm not bashing the book. Don't hate me. I love Bruce Dickinson. He's actually my favorite musician out of all these guys in these other books that I read. And as I said, it is the most well-written book. It might be technically the best book. I just feel like something was missing. And I was a little let down by the lack of details about Iron Maiden. That's what I would read about Iron Maiden, whereas in favor of, you know, stuff like planes and beer brewing, that was really descriptive and really in-depth when it came to that. But when it came to Iron Maiden, I don't know, there's a lot of things that I would have rather, you know, read about. There's a lot of things that I feel like I didn't get the whole story about. Like, his relationship with Steve Harris, the founder and co-songwriter. I didn't really, I don't know, I just didn't really, I feel like I didn't really learn all that much more about Iron Maiden than I already knew. But again, as I said, it's still my number 5. It's still a very well-written, very good book. I definitely recommend you read it. Yeah, I was a little let down, but there's still enough in there to keep you hooked. There were a few chapters I kind of just like scanned through because I was kind of bored. I don't really care how plane works or how beer is made or any of that. But he's a very interesting person, probably the most interesting of all these guys. He's in my top 3 favorite vocalists of all time, along with Rob Halford, Ronnie James Dio. He's amazing. He's a great musician and a great author, and this book's a testament to that. Again, it's the most well-written, and it probably is the best book, and the fact that he didn't have any help is definitely admirable, and there's a lot of things in here that makes it well worth the read. I still recommend it, even though I was let down in a way, I still highly recommend it, and it is definitely a must-read for any Maiden fan. But here's hoping that Steve Harris will release an autobiography at some point as well, because I'd love to read about the history of Iron Maiden, how they first formed, even though I probably already know everything that's that he's going to say. But there's probably a few details in there that, haven't been released anywhere. But anyway, let's move on. Still, a great book. Check it out. Bruce Dickinson's a good author, and What Does This Button Do? Is still a great book, despite maybe not a few details being glossed over to kind of a disappointing degree. But anyway, I still recommend it. It's still great. Still my top 5. Number 4, Iron Man, written by Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, my favorite guitarist of all time from my favorite band of all time. This is a really good book, and it's really interesting. If you've read Ozzy's autobiography, it's interesting to read this one because it's like the formation of Black Sabbath from a different point of view. You get to hear 2 totally different perspectives on how Black Sabbath came to be. You see it from a totally different viewpoint. And wow, there's a lot of stuff about guitar. Being a guitarist myself, this was a little more interesting to me to read than in a lot of ways than Ozzy, because I'm a guitarist. And I think he's really interesting. He's a huge inspiration on every heavy metal guitarist. When I think of Black Sabbath, I think of Tony Iommi. To me, Tony Iommi is Black Sabbath. I know a lot of people would say Ozzy, and yes, Ozzy's just as important. It wouldn't be the same without Ozzy, but Tony Iommi's the one who wrote all the riffs and most of the music. I think he's really the one who made Black Sabbath what they were. Him and Ozzy both, and Geezer, who, his lyrics, Ozzy's eerie vocals, and of course Tony Iommi's guitar playing, which, let's face it, is unparalleled. They're all really important in Sabbath, as well as Bill Ward's awesome beats. But I still think Tony Iommi's the main guy of Black Sabbath. He's the only remaining, he's the sole remaining member, the core member. He's been there the whole time. He's the only member who's been on every album, and Geezer Butler's been there for most of it, but really Tony Iommi's been on every single album. He's the sole constant remaining member. So I always think Black Sabbath Tony Iommi, because Ozzy wasn't even always there. He was only in the band for 10 years, then he returned for a few brief reunions, then finally returned, just in the last few years he was there again, but, you can't compete with Tony Iommi. Even Ozzy himself admits that Tony Iommi is the most talented member, so I'm actually quoting him on that. This is definitely a great read, and also, when the Ozzy story ends, if you read Ozzy's autobiography, he talks about when he was in Black Sabbath. Once he left, you don't hear much more about Black Sabbath except for the various reunions. We get to hear about Dio, freaking Ronnie James Dio, Tony Iommi's relationship with Dio, how he first met him, how he joined the band, and the other various frontmen, Ian Gillan, Glenn Hughes, Tony Martin, who's a personal favorite of mine. And he was with Black Sabbath the whole time. So this is the definitive Black Sabbath story to me, where Ozzy's autobiography was, it had a lot of Black Sabbath in there, obviously, but then, it had also a solo career as well. Tony Iommi had a pretty good solo career, too, and that's also detailed in this book. But this, to me, again, is the quintessential Black Sabbath story, since Tony Iommi was there for all of it. An incredible axeman. He talks about, the formation of heavy metal, how, you really understand why he was so groundbreaking as a guitarist. The infamous incident where he lost the tips of 2 of his fingers and had to tune his guitar down, further contributing to Black Sabbath's sound. He down-tuned his guitar, that made him even gloomier. It was a happy accident. Like, wow, like all these ingredients just, if it hadn't happened a certain way, heavy metal probably would have never been invented. And this book, if you want to hear about how heavy metal, the birth of heavy metal, the true birth of heavy metal, definitely read this book, whether you're a Sabbath fan or not. Tony Iommi's a legend. He's my favorite guitarist from my favorite band, and this book is a must-read for any Sabbath fan or any heavy metal fan. And it was co-written with T.J. Lammers. Yeah, Bruce Dickinson's the only one who wrote the book all himself, which is very impressive and admirable. Yeah, this has got it all. This has got the reasons, Dio, the reason they kicked Ozzy out, the reason Dio left, the reason Geezer Butler left that eventually came back, Bill Ward, Vinny Appice, it's all in there. It's all in there. Some great pictures of the band that I've never seen before. There's little Tony Iommi when he was a baby. All kinds of unreleased pictures I've never seen. Look at him; he looks so normal. Wow. And it's and like Ozzy's book, it's a very inspiring, very compelling rags to riches story. These guys started out dirt poor in a dingy little town, a very dismal, depressing town in England. Where they were just dirt poor. Everybody in the block wasn't very wealthy, and they're all living in poverty, and wearing the same shoes every day, and had their clothes were all dirty, and wore the same shirts every day and stuff. And it showed how they went from that to basically like paupers almost, like they were so dirt poor, to multi-billionaires and one of the biggest bands in the world. My favorite, obviously. So it's a very inspirational story in that way, too. But I love reading how bands first formed. I love reading about the history of the band, how they first came together, how all the members met and decided what they were going to contribute to the band, all the lineup changes. I love reading about the history of the band, and this book definitely doesn't disappoint when it comes to those elements. So I highly recommend it. It's a must-read. All right, let's move on. Again, I was going to give these books individual reviews. They were going to each get their own video. Maybe I'll get to that eventually. Maybe I'll do a review of each of these books, some more in-depth, more at length. But I figured I'd just cover them all in the same video and just kind of get it done. Because I don't have a whole lot to say about some of these books, except for maybe my #1 choice. But anyway, let's move on. Maybe individual videos to come someday. But number 3, I would definitely say, is I'm the Man by Anthrax. The full title is I'm the Man, the story of that guy from Anthrax, written by Scott Ian, the rhythm guitarist of course, Anthrax. I saw them live last night with Slayer, and they frickin' rocked. They were amazing. I'm so glad Joey Belladonna is back in the band after so many years. He was just incredible. I wish Dan Spitz could have been there, but John Denius was really good. He's a great lead player. I think probably the second best they've ever had next to Dan Spitz. I liked Rob Caggiano a lot too, though, so it's kind of hard to say. But Scott Ian is the rhythm guitarist, the founder, the leader, the de facto CEO of Anthrax. And like Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath, he's the sole constant member. And pretty much when you think of Anthrax, you think of Scott Ian. He's the Anthrax guy. He is Anthrax. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. And Frank Bello and Charlie Benante have been Frank Bello wasn't on the first album, but those two guys make up the rhythm section. They've been there pretty much from the beginning. They've been there for a lot of it too. When you think of Anthrax, you think of Scott Ian. Maybe there's a few other things that make you think of him too. Like reality shows and some other stuff. But anyway, yeah, this is a great story. If you want to know how Anthrax first began, how they went through so many lineup changes, and how they first discovered, they pretty much invented a rap metal. It's all in here. There's even an interesting story about Scott Ian trying to keep up with Lemmy from Motorhead and trying to get drunk, and then he just gets like all messed up, and it's really, really funny. It's hilarious. This is a really funny book. It's kind of like Ozzy's. There's a lot of humorous stories. Where he stole the baseball diamond. He's a huge baseball fan. There's a lot of chapters in here about baseball and skateboarding and comic books, which I enjoyed stuff. But it doesn't take over in favor of all the heavy metal stuff like Bruce Dickinson's book kind of does. There's still a lot of metal stuff in here. There's a lot of info about Anthrax. Pretty much everything you ever wanted to know about Anthrax, I think, is included in this book. I really want to know more about his relationship with singer Joey Belladonna, my favorite thrash metal vocalist, who I saw last night with this band. I wanted to know why he was kicked out. I wanted to know, why, the reasons for all that, and why they didn't think he was contributing enough, and why he wasn't considered a crucial component of the band. When he's my favorite thrash metal vocalist, and I like him way better than John Bush and Neil Turbin, who's still good. I wanted to know more about that, and this book definitely delivered. It explained all that stuff. It explained, as I just mentioned, the original singer Neil Turbin, why he left, why original bassist Dan Lilker left, which was replaced by Frank Bello. It explained the songwriting process. I now know that Scott Ian wrote most of the lyrics and Charlie Benante wrote most of the music. Actually, I think I knew that before, but I knew most of the history. But there's a lot of things I didn't know about that I learned from reading this awesome book. So I highly recommend it. Again, lots of very funny stories. Scott Ian's not really as much of a partier as you would think. He doesn't really do drugs. He doesn't drink. Which is cool, which is very admirable. I definitely look up the man. I have a lot of respect for him. I know some people have some problems with him, but hogging the spotlight and making everything all about him on reality shows and doing some other stuff. But come on, he's awesome. He's freaking Scotty from Anthrax. He's awesome. He's the riff man, you know. He's a very important part of thrash metal, and a lot of people don't like Anthrax, and some people even think they shouldn't be part of the Big Four. I couldn't disagree more. A huge Anthrax fan, and if you're a fan as well, check out this book. You will not regret it. I think it's highly recommended, because it's definitely the definitive story of Anthrax, written by the Anthrax man himself, Scott Ian, who I saw last night. He put on such a great show. All right, let's move on. Number 2, my second favorite heavy metal autobiography would have to be Mustaine, a heavy metal memoir. This was obviously written by Dave Mustaine with some help from Joe Layden. Oh, sorry, I forgot. John Wiederhorn co-wrote Scott Ian's book, if you're wondering. Joe Layden and Dave Mustaine wrote Mustaine, a heavy metal memoir. Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. Again, another guy who he is the band. Just like Tony Iommi and Scott Ian, he's the sole constant member of Megadeth. He's the CEO. He's the leader. He is Megadeth. When you think of Megadeth, you think of Dave Mustaine. He's the only constant member. He's the leader of the band. He's the lead guitarist, lead singer. I mean, main songwriter, main lyricist. He's everything. Dave Mustaine is Megadeth, and I can say that more than probably any other band, except for maybe Death, which was, you know, Chuck Schuldiner, or you know, most band has at least like 2 or 3 original members who contribute equally. When you think of Megadeth, you think of Dave Mustaine. Bassist David Ellefson was there for a lot of it too, and he's back in the band now, which is great, but Mustaine is Megadeth. This is a great read. My second favorite heavy metal autobiography for good reason. There's a lot of good pictures of him when he was young. There's a lot of good pictures you probably haven't seen. Yeah, you get to read about the formation of Megadeth, how him and David Ellefson just met because David Ellefson was playing his bass too loud, and Dave Mustaine complained, and then he ended up buying a beer, and then Megadeth was born. He actually, it goes into depth about their first lineups too, even before Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson joined the band. It explains they actually had another singer at one point, which is interesting. You know, before Dave Mustaine decided he would just be the vocalist, even though he's not really a vocalist, he's more of a guitarist, but ended up being the vocalist anyway. How somebody else actually kind of suggested the name Megadeth based on a song that he wrote after he was kicked out of Metallica. All kinds of great infos in this book. This is a true Megadeth story. If you ever want to know more about Megadeth, this book covers it all, and then some. But I gotta say, without a doubt, other than all the parts with Marty Friedman and Nick Menza, who make up my favorite lineup, Marty Friedman being one of my favorite guitarists of all time, my favorite part of this book was reading about, when I was reading it, was when he was in Metallica. Wow, that was just interesting. You know, I've heard that story told so many times. I've heard it from James Hetfield's point of view. I've heard it from Lars Ulrich's point of view. I even heard about Kirk Hammett and Ron McGovney talking about it. But you haven't heard the true story until you heard Dave Mustaine talk about it. And the thing is, he doesn't just blame them for it. He takes responsibility himself. He says it was, you know, just as much his fault as it was theirs, and things shouldn't happen this way. But the thing is, I think it happened for a reason. It was a blessing in disguise. If he hadn't been kicked out of Metallica, we would have never had Megadeth. Now, instead of one great band to listen to, we have 2 great bands to listen to. And I'm so glad that he was kicked out. Plus, I feel like he got more time to shine in Megadeth. You know, he was the lead singer. I mean, he was the band leader. Metallica was pretty much Ulrich and Hetfield's band, you know. He really got time to he was able to shine way more in his own band, Megadeth, and hell, you know, I think current Megadeth is better than current Metallica. I don't think that anything Megadeth did it could ever really beat their first 3 albums, except for maybe Rust in Peace. But I freaking love Megadeth, and this is definitely a definitive read. It's a must-read for any metal fan, especially if you love Megadeth as much as I do. And yeah, if you want to know the whole story about how he was kicked out of Metallica, it's in there, and then some. Yeah, he goes into great detail about that. There's a lot of stuff about drug abuse, too. Man, if you think that Nikki Sixx was bad, then you were right, because he probably is the worst one. Dave Mustaine he was pretty bad as well, man. Heroin and God, everything else. He talked about some of his old bandmates when Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson was in the band, how they would trade all their equipment for heroin, and it was terrible. It was a rough time. It's almost a miracle how they made it through all that. But you know, then it's an inspirational, you know, addiction story as well. You know, he shows how he beat his drug addiction, all the years of abuse, and how he became clean and sober, and he even found God in the process. You know, he became Christian as well. Recovering alcoholic, recovering heroin addict, all that stuff. So, yeah, this is a very inspirational story in that regard, too. And he has a lot of personal stuff in there as well. I feel like I really got to know Dave Mustaine and his side of the story in this. A lot of people dismissing him as a loudmouth, arrogant, know-it-all, but he really has a sympathetic side as well. And I really, as I said, he really shines in that book. And I love reading about his relationship with his other bandmates, Chris Poland and Garth Samuelson and Marty Friedman and Nick Menza and Jeff Young and Al Petrilli, and all of them is so neat. Chuck Beeler. It's so neat to read about all those different musicians because they've had a lot of lineups over the years, and it goes into detail about the how and the why, for sure. So definitely a great read. I highly recommend it. Mustaine. Dave Mustaine, he's the man. And yeah, a lot of people don't like him, but you gotta admit, the guy's very, very talented, and he worked his ass off to get to where he is today. So, he may have got booted out of Metallica, but I think he definitely became a force to be reckoned with in his own right. So anyway, Mustaine, highly recommended. All right, let's move on. Number 1, I Am Ozzy. This is my favorite heavy metal autobiography. Wow, is this a terrific read. So much, though, that I had to read this 4 times. I've read this more than any of the other books. There he is, little John Osborne. I talked about this a little bit in my Q&A video. Somebody asked what I thought about it, and I gave it like a miniature review. This is a great read. Not only does it detail the history of Black Sabbath, how they first formed, how Ozzy first became a singer, his relationship with his other band members, and his relationship with his first wife, Thelma Mayfair, and then later Sharon Arden, a.k.a. Sharon Osbourne. Lots of stuff about Black Sabbath in here, and it's also another inspiring addiction story where he overcame all his years of abusing his body and becoming sober, even though it took him a little longer than some of the others, I suspect. It's also another inspiring rags to riches story, much like Tony Iommi. He was probably even more poor than Tony Iommi was, and yeah, very interesting. It's got his dismissal from Black Sabbath, when he first met Randy Rhoads, when he first became a solo artist, when he returned to the band. It's all in there. And the thing is, there's a lot of stuff about drugs and alcohol in this. It was co-written by Chris Ayres. But I know that Ozzy had a lot, and it's weird because he has a bad memory, he even admits in this book, but he was able to recall quite enough to give a very compelling story. And the way he tells it, I'm not really interested in the whole drugs thing. I don't really like reading about musicians doing drugs and drinking and abusing their bodies. I'm more about the music part and the history of the band, but he wrote it in such a way that it stayed interesting. And it's so freaking hilarious. This book is a riot. It's so humorous. It's so funny. The way he wrote it, the way he talks is just hilarious. The way he describes things is just side-splitting. I just love it. Yeah, so many funny stories. Like, he's done a lot of really stupid things, and even he admits that they were stupid, and it's really funny reading him talk about himself. He makes fun of himself a lot in this book. And another thing that got me is this guy should have died 100 times. The fact that he's still alive and breathing is a miracle. All the drugs, the drinking, the STDs, all the stupid shenanigans, being arrested. He did some really dumb things when he was drunk, and after he was sober, he admitted he shuddered to think of all the things he did when he was younger and when he was drinking. He was just like, I can't believe I'm alive. He's got all the diseases. He's a miracle. I know he's got a lot of health issues, but the fact that he can even walk around and talk is breathtaking, to say the least, after all he went through. This book tells all the things he did. I don't know how he survived. He did things that, normal people probably wouldn't survive, doing once. All the overdoses and all the crazy shit he did. It's a miracle that he's still here. But I'm glad, because he's the Prince of Darkness, and this book is a very inspirational tale telling you how he became the Prince of Darkness. From John Michael Osborne, the poor, dyslexic kid who was bullied in school and ridiculed by his peers and didn't think he had a chance in the world if I'd just end up in jail or be a hobo for the rest of his life, how he became the freaking Prince of Darkness and the frontman of Black Sabbath, the godfather of heavy metal. Great read. And as I said, I love reading about the history of Black Sabbath. I love reading about all Ozzy's relationship with his band members, Randy Rhoads, the tragic accident that took his life. But the best part of this book is all the funny stories that he has, all the funny, stupid, crazy things that he's done over the years. Ozzy's done it all. He's the ultimate showman. He really doesn't work a crowd. Well, I did say, Tony Iommi is Black Sabbath to me. Ozzy's the Prince of Darkness, and there's never been a better showman, I don't think. He's more theatrical. He's all about the on-stage antics, and when you're watching Black Sabbath, your eyes are usually on Ozzy. As awesome as Tony Iommi's gloomy, melodic riffs are, and his amazing solos and fretwork. Usually all eyes are on Ozzy's crazy antics, and that's all in this book and more. This book definitely deserves its own review. Even if I don't review all the others, I'm definitely going to review this one. Because it's definitely worth talking about even more than I've done. This is just like a little abridged version of my true review. Yeah, Ozzy's just a great guy, very talented, very charismatic. He really knows how to work a crowd. He really knows what he's doing. He always does, you know, he's done so many crazy things, but I feel like he's always been in the right place at the right time, and I feel like he kind of knows what he's doing. Because every single stupid thing he's ever done has further contributed to why he's such an interesting personality and why he's such a great person to read about. This book is phenomenal. It's so funny. It's so damn humorous. And very inspiring as well. And if you're a Black Sabbath fan and want to read about their history from, you know, another perspective other than Tony Iommi's, if you read his book or whichever book you read, definitely read them both if you're a Sabbath fan, because that's a must. Definitely check this book out for some hilarious stories, some an inspiring rags to riches and beating drug addiction story, and also the birth of heavy metal. Alright guys, well I'm Hellhound. These are some great books. I realize that there's some that I missed, there's some that I haven't read. I know Alex Skolnick from Testament has an autobiography out. I really need to read that. He's one of my favorite guitarists of all time. I saw him too last night at the concert. He was rocked. He's shredding solos with nothing short of incredible. Great guitarist. Rex Brown from Pantera, I know he has an autobiography. I know that'd be an interesting read. You know, the relationship between the Abbott brothers and Phil and Zelma. I know that'd be, you know, all the stuff about Dimebag. I know that'd be a great read. There was a lot about Dimebag in Scott Ian's book as well, which I think you should definitely. I won't dare give it away because it's very well worth the read. Very, very compelling, very interesting stuff. Very intriguing. And I know that K.K. Downing, one of the co-founders and guitarists of Judas Priest, one of my favorite bands. He's no longer in the band, unfortunately, but he's coming up with an autobiography too. And I'd love to read a Judas Priest story, so I'll definitely be checking that one out, and I'll let you guys know what I think as soon as I read it. I wish Rob Halford released an autobiography, and Dio also had one in the works before he unfortunately passed. But his wife Wendy, Wendy Dio, his widow, is planning on completing it. She's going to finish out his autobiography, so I'm looking forward to that because I know that's going to be a great read, even if it's not entirely written by the master of metal himself, Ronnie James Dio. I know that'll be a great read. But if you guys know of any other great heavy metal autobiographies or any other good books about heavy metal, let me know in the comments below, because I love reading about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. I can do it forever. This video is almost 30 minutes long. I didn't mean for it to go that long, but I just love talking about metal, and these are some great books. Definitely check them out. Alright guys, I'm Hellhound, and maybe someday I'll give them each their own video. They just definitely deserve an individual review, for sure. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Until next time.